To give the viewer an insight into the development of aviation at the end of World War I, I have provided a copy of these regulations issued at Point Cook in 1919 and to take effect from the 1st of January 1920. I shall just pick out 4. Number 1. Don't take the machine into the air unless you are satisfied it will fly. Number 6. Pilots should carry a handkerchief in a handy position to wipe off goggles. Number 8. In case the engine fails on takeoff, land straight ahead regardless of objects. Number 11. Learn to gauge altitude, especially on landing. And the one I like most of all is number 21. Pilots will not wear spurs while flying. You must remember that most of these pilots were previously cavalry officers. I hope you enjoy this talk as much as I have.
As I introduce and welcome our guest speaker, Kevin O'Reilly, who will be speaking about Flying in Time, a book that he wrote which covers aviation history in country Victoria and the Riverina. Kevin gave me a short bio on his background. He mentions he was born in the Wimmera part of Western Victoria in 1936, lived close to the RAAF navigation base at Nil, and during his formative years he developed a strong interest in aviation, which is maintained through his later life. He did national service in 1955, not surprisingly a radio operator in the RAAF. Some 10 years ago, in driving through Nil, he came to the realisation that despite a lot of effort being put in during World War II with regard to training, there was no record of those activities, and he wrote his first book in just 5 years, and he tells me he sold over 1,000 copies, which is quite credible. He mentions that he's interested in light planes and flown a lot, although not with a licence. I think if he had born in 1906 it wouldn't have been an issue because most of them didn't have them. He's currently working on a biography of an aviation photographer, Charles Pratt, which is taking a fair amount of his time, and he feels it will be a worthwhile addition. Okay, well, thank you very much. Would you put your hands together for our guest speaker?
Fine. Now, regrettably, I'm one of those people who has a rather insignificant voice, so can everybody hear me? Yeah. Seeing somebody's told a joke, maybe I'll try and tell one too about hearing. Poor old Morton lived in a country town and things were pretty low. He saw in the local paper where one of these hot gospelists was coming to town. He thought, oh, well, I'll go along, what the hell. So he's there and they've been through all the hallelujahs and what have you, and then it came the healing time. And the preacher man spotted poor old Morton and said, my son, you look down. What's the problem? Morton said, I'm worried about my hearing. Hear that, brethren? And they all prayed and put their hands on his head and everything, and when that was over he said, that fixed your hearing problem? Morton said, I don't really know, it's not until next Tuesday. I'll swing this thing around, or I might even take it off. That'll be okay. It does. I'm just wondering whether that thing works. Oh no, that's okay. I can do it. Fine. Look, my little talk today will just be on really around Melbourne and the beginnings of commercial aviation. There was all aviation up until the end of World War I was controlled by the Defence Department. The only training done was at Point Cook by the Australian Flying Corps, and nearly everybody coming back from World War I arrived back, some from the Middle East, but mainly from England, who were tied up with the Australian Flying Corps over there. Now, a lot of these fellows decided that aviation was going to be the thing. So some of the flyers in Europe either bought planes back with them or arranged to have them brought back or formed companies to venture into commercial aviation because they all saw a need for it. And the first of these was actually a fellow who didn't get into the Air Force, a fellow called Graham Carey, who learned to fly during World War I time, but because being too old they wouldn't take him. He learned to fly on a Blériot that had been left behind by a Frenchman, Maurice Guillot, in the beginning of the war in 1914. Anyway, at war's end, he bought at disposals 4 Morris Farman Shorthorns. Now, I don't know if you know what they are, but they're a pretty antiquated old plane. But he flew one around for many, many years. But he bought 4, had them delivered to his aerodrome at Fisherman's Bend, and of course a storm came up overnight and 2 of them were rolled into balls, and that was the end of them. It gave him a good source of spare parts. Anyway, well, this is a ship called the Kaiser I Hind, or in other words, the Empress of India, which was an ex-passenger liner, and this was a picture of it arriving in Port Melbourne, and it was bringing home all the Australian airmen from Europe in July 1919. Thanks, Phil. And of course, this is the old Morris Farman Shorthorn, and this was one of Carey's planes. And the pilot there is a pilot called Harold Trelaw. Harold, he was in England when the war broke out. Found out that he wasn't the college type, so he wasn't going to get into the British Air Force, so he whizzed back to Australia, and he was one of the first of the Australian airmen to go overseas. It was to do with the first half flight. They went to Mesopotamia. His plane failed on the first mission. He was captured by the Turks and spent 2 very miserable years as a prisoner of war. Anyway, he got home before the rest of the airmen from Europe, and he flew this plane down the bay alongside the Kaiser I Hind as a welcome home to all the other airmen. This is Graham Carey's aerodrome at Port Melbourne, and it's Melbourne Air Service. It's at the end of, I think this track leading in is the end of Graham Street. Well, it's a different scenario now, isn't it? You can see the four-master in the background up there, so this would be a 1919 or 1920 photograph. So that was Carey's his office there, and this is his hangar. The other buildings were the Melbourne Rifle Club, which were behind. They used to fire off in the other direction. I hope they didn't go in his line. Thanks. But anywhere, the runways anywhere. There were no aerodromes at this time, no aerodromes anywhere except at Point Cook. And of course these planes, let's face it, they could land in 100 yards and they could take off in 100 yards, very slow speeds. But as you can see, it would be a muddy old patch there in the wrong time of the year. This is one of the Farmans here, and that's the office, which was an old schoolhouse from Brighton. It was brought down to Fisherman's Bend. But these buildings here are all belonging to the Rifle Club, and presumably they shot over from the other direction. Yes, thanks. This is Graham Carey with his old machine. It's got Carey painted on the side. He flew this for at least 10 years and covered an enormous amount of distance in it. He flew it to Adelaide on one occasion. Had a pretty powerful Beardmore engine in it, the fact about 160 horsepower, which is pretty powerful for those days, but certainly an antiquated thing. He had it painted on all sorts of things. He had Carey's chickens on it because Carey's chickens in the northern hemisphere were the storm petrels, birds that flew out to sea that but somehow or other he adopted that as a nickname with a sense of humour, no doubt. Another shot of the schoolhouse come office, and of course this is Carey there, himself just preparing to take up joyriders. Well, that was the business in those days, and a lot of people had their first experience of an aeroplane there, but oh Jove, I think they were pretty brave. Okay. Another shot of the aerodrome there. There's his two remaining Morris Farmans there, and in the centre, this is a bit of a mystery. I'd love to solve it. It's a D86, a de Havilland 6. Now, it could be the one belonging to my current hero, Charlie Pratt. And I'll tell you a little bit about my Charlie shortly. Thanks, Bill. This is Carey's plane, as you can see there, the old Morris Farman. I think this is the Port Melbourne Gas Works in the background. This is Charlie Pratt's D86. Now, the reason I got interested in Charlie Pratt was he was a New Zealander on his way home from Egypt. He'd bought 4 aeroplanes in Egypt at disposals. The ship landed in Melbourne December the 8th, 1919, and right in the middle of a big shipping strike. There's no way he was going to get his planes back to New Zealand in time for the flying season. The ship was docked at Victoria Dock, right behind where Etihad Stadium is now, and he persuaded the captain to sling one of his crates over the side onto the wharf. He assembled this plane off the wharf and he flew it off the wharf. Now, this is it the following day. Yes. Okay. Well, he proceeded to make a bit of money. He'd worked his passage on the boat as well as had the plane on board. This is Graham Carey here saying goodbye to his wife and daughter. This is his son up here. You can see it's advertising pure velvet soap at this stage. And you can see as there were no aerodromes around, they had to put the plane down wherever they could out there, and sometimes it was a bit out of town where they landed it. So here's the emergency transport. That's an aerial shot that was roped onto the undercarriage. Now we move across very close by to the Shaw Ross aerodrome. Harry Shaw was the son of a Western District wealthy grazier, and when World War I broke out, Harry was riding his motorbike around Scotland, and when war broke out he immediately enlisted with his motorbike, and anyway finished up being trained by the Royal Flying Corps, and after the war arrived back in Melbourne with a partner, Bert Ross, and he then got the agency for the Farman machines, and he was hoping to sell all these little Farman sports, they called them, only tiny little plane. He was hoping to sell them around all the Riverina and to all the graziers and farmers so they could do all their roundups around the farm in them. Anyway, I don't know that he ever sold one, but anyway, they went into the barnstorming business again and took passenger rides and that sort of thing, as well as doing aerial photography. Now, I brought you this photo just to show where we are. This is the Prince's Pier, or it was known as the New Pier, and which is gone now. And of course here is his aerodrome over here. Now I've shown this picture just because to show you where the aerodrome was. Carey was over here a bit further, so they were pretty close by. The ship is the P&O liner, the Naldera, and the year is 1927 here. And see this plane here, it's an SE-5 Air Force plane, and a flying officer, Fred Scherger, was flying it, and he was dropping a farewell parcel to a young lady on this ship, and after this happened, he happened to fly between the ship and the wharf, and he got severely carpeted for it. Anyway, but he did, in the end, rise up to become Australia's first Air Chief Marshal. Thanks. This is Harry Shaw. The year is 1921, sorry. Loading a box of Paramount films on board his Avro 504 for a flight to Deniliquin. A bit of a promotional flight. He was still keen to sell these little aeroplanes to the station owners up there. This is his partner Bert Ross, and Harry Shaw flew the 504 to Deniliquin, and followed by Bert Ross with the little Farman Sport. Yep. Here it is outside the hotel in the main street in Deniliquin. It landed in the main street. But I fear it didn't enthuse the local farmers or graziers, because I don't think he ever sold any of them, but it was an interesting flight. This is Shaw and Bert Ross on the right-hand side. Tragedy was to follow about a month after this. This photo was taken at Deniliquin. I'll come back to that in a minute. Here's Harry Shaw again over here. Everybody was out for a bit of publicity in those days, the same as now, and of course here we've got Harry's looking for publicity, and also the promoters of, what is it, Fuller's Review. I think that must have been the equivalent of the Tivoli in those days. But this Laura Gerright, who was supposedly an English girl and held a pilot's licence in England, so whether she actually flew the plane, I doubt it, but anyway, she certainly flew in it with Harry Shaw over Melbourne. And of course these are some of the publicity bigwigs there. Now this is Laura. Now, and I had a good look at this. I don't know how many whales had to die to get her into that, but that's Laura. That's lovely Laura. Yeah. This is the 504 plane again. It was the 504 was an excellent plane. It was an Avro, rotary engine, 100 horsepower. In other words, it wasn't a radial engine, it was a rotary. The whole engine spun. The propeller, in other words, was fixed to the engine, and the whole unit spun on a central shaft. These are a couple of Shaw's mechanics there, but the Shaw logo on the side of the plane. Yep. Now, as I said, about a month after the trip to Deniliquin, Bert Ross was taking this young lady and her fiancé for a joyride at Port Melbourne. Plane went into a spin, crashed into somebody's backyard right on the beach. The inquest revealed that the young lady's heel had got caught in the control wires. So that was the end of Bert Ross. I recently visited his grave down in the Brighton Cemetery. Thank you. This is Harry Shaw's palatial home, or was it really that of his father, down here at Beaumaris. It was called The Point. This is Beach Road. This is Hayden's Road. And this is, I forget, but anyway, you can see the old electric tram went down there. Well, no, I don't think there was Tramway Parade. It might have been Rosemary or something like that, or what on? Was it? Yeah, I'm not sure. One of those that ran off, but it wended its way down to the tram terminus there, and probably in Tramway Parade, I would say. Harry Shaw would often fly one of his little Farmans back home for lunch and land in the paddock here. So, and you'll see one there, thank you. Now, this is the little Farman in the paddock alongside the house at Beaumaris. Now, this young lady here, to the best of my knowledge, is still living. She lives on top of the hill, just a couple of doors from the Beaumaris RSL. Pat Glass is her name. And the other daughter of Harry, she was killed in a plane crash herself, a light plane. She was a very keen flyer, but she died back in the 70s, I think. Thank you. just another shot of the same thing. So some of these are pretty fuzzy, and I can't apologise for those because they're better than nothing, aren't they? Yep. This is the old DH6. He bought this from Harold Trelaw. This is Shaw did. Shaw finished up. He went. I think he had a bit of a clearing fire early in the 1930s, and most of his machines were lost. But he was bankrupted because of a court case, defamation case, and then he went into the boat business, and I think he got involved with early outboard motors, and he had a business down there in the creek at Mordialloc. Can anybody remember the name Shaw Benson?
Yes, Benson and Shaw.
Right, Benson and Shaw, right. Well, he was the Shaw. He went into the boats after he lost out in the aeroplanes. Yes, that's right. Same aeroplane here. Same with Larkin's mob. They did trips around the bay in holiday time, dropping bundles of newspaper over onto the football grounds and hoping they didn't hit anybody with them. But actually there wasn't one incident in 1920 where Larkin, a different operator, clipped a tree at Mornington and killed his passenger, and the passenger was a young fellow called Philip Nunn, and he was the son of the Buckley and Nunn. Anyway, there was a big to-do about that, and because he wasn't supposed to be on board the plane, and they had something like 20,000 people going to the funeral. This is Shaw's little machines again. This is up at Benalla, taking joyriders. Anybody going? That's okay. The same DH6 at Port Melbourne with some of his crew. I do have the names of these as ground staff. That's Harry Shaw still there with this machine. Okay, that's the Shaw staff at Port Melbourne. This one here is Bert Huxley. He went on to become one of the early Qantas pilots. Yep. This is Jimmy Smith, one of the mechanics. Whenever you went anywhere in these planes, you took a mechanic with you. He was in the back, and he had to put down somewhere. It was his job to fix it. So he's dressed up ready for a trip somewhere or other. Now we move on to another firm that set up in 1920. This is Aviation Limited out at Glenroy, right alongside the railway line, about near where the Glenroy station is now. Now they only started off with 3 or 4 planes, came in with a big hullabaloo about how they're going to conduct airlines services between the states and all this sort of thing, but look, the machinery they had in those days was never up to it. Thank you. Now this machine here had a bit of a sad end. It was one of their good machines, and Armstrong with it with FK8. It could take passengers in an enclosed cabin, and Leggett and Snook, 2 of the pilots, had gone up to Ararat to do a weekend's barnstorming. And of course no aerodromes in those days, so the best place to fly to was the local racecourse. So they went up on the Friday evening, they tied their plane down on the racecourse and went off to stay in a hotel for the night and come back to do a day's flying with all hopefully their passengers the next day. Got there, their plane had been reduced to rubble. They didn't realise it, but they shared the aerodrome with a bull who took objection to it. So that was the end of one of their another shot of the same plane. Yes. Now this one here, this is from the Punch magazine of the day. It says, the other day, a young couple were married in an aeroplane at Inglewood, an increasing tendency for this sort of thing. Now Snook and Leggett here again, and the same people. Now, I dare say they didn't get married in the plane, they probably got married and then had a flight, and they were considered to be... I like the bit down the bottom here. Advice to those about to marry. Marry in an aeroplane if you will, but after marriage don't fall out. Another one of Aviation Limited's early shots of Melbourne. That's Melbourne in 1920. Now we move on to the other aerodrome at Glen Huntly, which was the Larkin Sopwith aircraft code. This had quite a long life and could have been a rival for Qantas had things gone his way, which it didn't. But he set up here, this is his hangar, and just off Grange Road in Glen Huntly, between Grange Road and Coonang Road, right behind where the state school is there on the bend, and if people can recall that in Grange Road. Yeah. And yes, this is this is where the aerodrome was. This is a 1930s photo. I presume this was done by Charlie Pratt, my man that I'm working on, as a publicity shot for advertising purposes. This is all new area, new estate obviously, but this would be early 1930s. But that area there was where the Larkin aerodrome was. Yep. This is Boxing Day in 1919. They had an air pageant down, and it was held on the racecourse at Epsom at Mordialloc. And they had about 6 aeroplanes there. This is a Sopwith Dove, which is a civil it came from the Camel and the Sopwiths early on, and of course Larkin had the Sopwith agency here, so they were all trying to promote these things furiously, of course, but they had this carnival down there, and look, they had something like 10,000 people there, and they had a race down to Frankston and back, and it was quite a to-do. And, so I'll move on. Thanks, Phil. Here's the same shot. That's that same plane, the Sopwith Dove, rotary engine, of course. The other fellow over here is the Bolton and Paul. This had only been a month before flown across Bass Strait by Arthur Long, and he was the first man to fly Bass Strait. He flew from Stanley to King Island and followed the coast up to Victoria. They had a French designed V8 engine in that Bolton and Paul. It was a good machine actually, and it had quite a long life. Long went on to become a leading stockbroker in Melbourne. This is just another shot of that same plane, the Bolton and Paul. Good old exhaust pipe one. Here's the another Sopwith Dove at the aerodrome at Glen Huntly. And that one's still got its English markings on it, which would have... This is... civil aviation came into being after the war. There were no regulations whatsoever, and of course it was real hillbilly stuff. People were doing all sorts of things. No restrictions on where you could fly, how high you could fly, how low you could fly, or where you landed or anything. So the Civil Aviation Department was formed, and that didn't come into being until July 1921, when all planes had to be registered and all pilots had to be licensed. So things got a modicum of order after that. But this is still, this is prior to that, but still with the English registration on it. Another shot of the little Dove, nice little plane, rotary engine again. Yep, same plane. Yep, and here it is spinning up. Now this occasion was at a bit of a fun day at Glen Huntly. Or fun, things turned a bit funny apparently. Thanks Philip, we'll get on. They had organised a day to take Tivoli Showgirls for a ride. These are the cast of a show called As You Were from the TIV, and they were all there at Glen Huntly to have a flight. And this had all been put in the paper for publicity purposes, and about 12,000 people turned up, and of course there was no way of controlling them. There was no police there and no marshals to, and of course in the end they took one flight, but then they decided people were going to get chopped in half, so they had to call the flying off at that stage. So you can see one of the girls sitting in there. They're probably wondering if they can clear the crowd enough to take off, but it all had to be called off in the end. Yep. just another shot of the, this is sorry, that last plane and this one, the Sopwith GNU, G-N-U. Yeah, very good plane actually. The Larkin one, this one is, you can see this label of the Herald on it. I don't know where they were off here, but this is a fellow called Bob McInnes. He was a mechanic, and I've dug up a little bit on his past and recovered a few. This is one of photos from his relatives' collection that still just see. A lot of these photos have never been published before. So, they did in this plane they did had a 200 horsepower engine in it. It was quite a powerful machine, and they flew this down to Sale, and it only took about an hour and a quarter or something with a tailwind, so pretty good for those days. Yeah. We move on down here. This is in February 1920. This is my mate Charlie Pratt, who flew off the wharf at Victoria Dock. He had settled in Geelong because they figured that Melbourne's just about inundated with pilots, and of course they said there's a landing ground you can use at Geelong on the Belmont Common. So we had to share the aerodrome with cows and what have you, but they had this day at Geelong, and of course Larkin's Sopwith Dove was there, the Sopwith GNU was over here, and there's Charlie's old D86. And this is sort of a bit of a race they had around the course, but late in the day, the fellow called Wilson in flying the Dove, he zoomed in low over the crowd on the middle of the ground and removed the head of Charlie's mechanic. And so there was held up over that, of course, and crashed. So here's Charlie's plane again, the one that he'd flown off the wharf at Victoria Dock. So yeah, this is parked the next day, 30th of December 1919. Yep. The same plane here, he took it over to Williamstown. Now, don't ask me how he got it here, because it's in the yard alongside the old customs house. So whether he landed it there or wheeled it there or whatever, but he was over there for a day's flying. So this isn't Charlie, this is his guard dog, I'd say. Bulldog. Thank you. This is the Pratt Aerodrome at Belmont Common. So it was quite a good area, although it got very wet and muddy. And of course there were cows and cattle everywhere, so there were a few casualties involving cows over the years. But Charlie did a remarkable job with aerial photography. He's, I've literally got hundreds and hundreds of his photos, and he was passionate about photography as he was with his flying. Well, there's Charlie, my man, alongside his D86. This is sort of the causeway at the bottom of Mooraville Street. I don't know, I think there's a Kmart or something along there now, but yes, but I did many miles in that old plane. Yep. Here he is with his Avro. He also had an Avro. He brought 4 aeroplanes back from Egypt, one 504, 2 of the DH6 de Havillands, and 1 Sopwith Pup, another derivation of the Sopwith Camel, only for civil use. This photo is taken over at Penola in South Australia, so he travelled far and wide, taking people on joyrides, and there happened to be a circus in town, so hence the lion. His relatives always thought he did some time in South Africa, but I said, no, I'm sorry, at Penola, South Australia. There we are. So everyone's still awake. Anyway, now I'll just move on a little bit here and just show you some aerial, or you'd rather leave that on. Where's my mate Dave, my man? Okay, he's going to give a little prize to anybody who makes the right guesses here. Fine, okay, well you know where that is, don't you? Here's one of Charlie's photographs of Melbourne. Electric trams there, but cable trams in Bourke Street. bit of an absence of motor cars. So this is probably around the 1930 era. There's the old Federal Hotel still there. And it must be after 1930 because St Paul's, I think, has got a spire on it, isn't it? Yes. So it must be after 1930. Okay. Another good one of his shots there. Anybody pick where that is? Yes, right. Give him a volley. Who was first?
Who put his hand up?
Who? Yeah, you got to put your hand up. Who was first for a hand up? There we are. Okay. This is Spencer Street. Yes, along here. Now, at this point, there was no bridge across Spencer Street, so and this was the old Melbourne Ice Works, and this was the fish market. So that probably calmed a bit at that stage, I would reckon. This is the railway administrative buildings, and here's the old Spencer Street railway buildings. Thank you. Okay, who can guess where this one is? No.
No? The race course?
Racecourse there. No. I think I'm going to save my lolly here, I think. Would you believe Bridge Road, Richmond? And this is the old Richmond Racecourse. Cable tram buildings here. And yeah, so this is Hawthorn up in this area. Yeah. Rightio. How about this one? Racecourse. Go put your hand up. Williamstown. Who's the Williamstown?
Who's the Williamstown man?
Yes, that was used as an army camp in World War II, and I think the grandstand got burnt down, and I think it lost its purpose after that. But it was a pretty big show, as you can see. Yes. Okay, you are.
Morris.
No.
Nope.
Frankston.
Mount Eliza.
There it is. This is Oliver's Hill. Or the beginning of Oliver's Hill, anyway. Yeah.
You going to win it?
Yeah.
Oh,
Oh, yeah. Next one.
He's still jet lagged. Morty Alec.
Yes. On the original of this, I can see on this little building here. Sorry, I'm getting a bit of feedback. On this building here is roughly painted 1925, so I think that was a bit of graffiti for the new year. So I reckon this is 1926. Looks as though the old palm trees have just been sown at that stage, but and the road went off at a different angle. I think it follows all the way straight up now. This is the hotel that's still there, the Sporting Club, and it's sort of got a ring here. I was wondering whether they may have held horses, because they had the racecourse just over at Epsom, not far away. This is the old Paramount Theatre. I know that, I managed to identify that. But yeah, so it's good to see some of these old ones. Yep. Oh, well. Woody Alec again, different view.
Who got that?
Whose hand? Here's the racecourse over here, the Epsom racecourse. I think this photo is probably about 1950, judging by the motor cars, but this was taken by my mate Charlie Pratt also. He kept his interest in aerial photography up for many years. He was flying a Pussmoth plane at this stage.
Your Benson and Shure is not far from that.
That's right. Well, they were along there, weren't
That's
they?
it, yes.
That's right. I think I remember that. It's called the Blue Line or something now. But
up near the overpass.
up here, was it?
Yeah, right.
Of course, there was Pompey's
Back a little bit.
back down
Yeah,
here.
that's about it.
Yeah. Of course, this is all fun parlours and things at this stage. Yes. Right, thanks, Philip. How about this one? looking at me too hard. Everyone give in? No. Standing on. Now there's the, oh, I don't know, is it the town hall buildings there? The market's back down this way somewhere. But it was just a sort of a two-lane road in those days. Mm. No. Edith Vale's the one. He is. There we are. Yeah, once again, probably around the 1950 mark, I think, that one. Okay. Now, here's one. Here's a real one for you. Get two lollies if you get this one. In Melbourne area.
Springvale Road.
No.
Springvale?
No.
Glenroy.
No.
David's Rest.
No.
Yes and no?
No. Tell me when you give in. Well, I don't know whether it's a church or a little schoolhouse. I'm not sure. I'm told it still exists, actually, not in that position. But
Is it Springvale?
no, no,
Dingley.
no,
It's got to be Christmas Ben.
no.
Who knows?
No. I tell you.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. This is Burke Road, High Street Q, Kilby Road, along there. Yeah. So, yes. Well, it took me a long time to find it, and I sort of identified it by the churches up on the hill, actually. Yes. Right. Sandringham.
Who got that one right? I thought you haven't got that yet.
I think Andy. Yes. These little shelters in the park over here are the old, what do they call them, the grips from the cable trains. Yes. This is the Roxy Theatre. There, you can see the hansom cabs for the taxis, and of course the tram went its way down to Burber Morris at that stage. Not sure of the year, it's got to be 1920s though. Mm. Yep. All I can say is this is a very grand home here. No. No.
Surrender?
No.
McGrath.
No. Brighton's the one.
Right.
This is North Road there. The end of North Road. Who said Brighton?
I did. I know.
Somebody
You got
did.
one?
Brighton. You got any left?
I'm going to be here all day.
I over here once my right.
Rodmer
Earlier on, this photo is probably about 1930, I would reckon. But going back to World War I, it was owned by a fellow called John Watson, and he had a son who was flying in England, and of course he had a crash. He couldn't get in the English Air Force, so he came home, but he came home and built his own aeroplane in the billiard room. And you may have heard of Basil Watson. Anyway, he built this lovely little plane. He flew it to Mount Gambier and back. He flew it to Bendigo and back a couple of times. He wasn't quite happy with something, and he altered a setting on the wing strut, and of course that was the undoing of him. He was doing a loop down off the water at Point Cook, and the wing fell off, and that was the end of Basil. Well, you all know that, surely.
right in Bath.
Yeah, okay, right. Yeah, okay. Oh, yeah.
Right.
Okay. Just flick through to the right. Bo Morris is over here, yes. Give him a look.
Who got that one?
Wiggins Point.
Green Park.
No,
Green Point.
no.
Sandringham.
We're in a hurry here. Point Norman. Point Norman. Oh, you know that, so just
Sandringham.
we better finish up. Right, yeah. Point Norman. Yes, American fleet in 1925. There were 3 battleships there on cruiser.
The
And
Great
about,
White Fleet.
and about 30 corvettes tied up in Victoria Dock. About 10,000 marched through. And that's an Anzac Day march in 1927 when the Duke of, the Prince of Wales was out here. Back in those days, the march started here at the Aspro building and went up Collins Street to the Cenotaph at Burke Street. And that's all.